Every couple of years, I give what I call a homily by request. So my typical modus operandi is that I get up on a Sunday morning about 5:30, and after I've showered, I look at the readings for the day, and I meditate for a long time on it, and then I grab a pen and I start just free associating to what ideas are coming through from the readings. And then I look at what I've written down, and I identify a couple of themes in it, and I isolate those themes, and then I either remember a story or I make up a story that will introduce the topic, and then I come up here and I try to channel it. But occasionally, I get a request to address a particular topic. And so in lieu of the fact that after today's Mass, we have a special meeting of the community to talk to the topic of Christ consciousness. So the board asked me during the week, in fact a few weeks ago, if I might pick up on that topic for the homily today. And so I focused on that for today. And so as I thought about it during the week, it seemed to me that I could look at three different aspects of Christ consciousness. I could look at the individual journey into Christ consciousness, or I could look at the notion of the planetary commitment to Christ consciousness, or I could look at what it's like to attempt Christ consciousness in a small group such as ours, Companions on the Journey. And so I opted to do two of the three and to let the community do the third one during the meeting. So I'm going to make two main points today, although there'll be about 10 sub-points in each of the two. So the two parts of the equation that I'm going to try to wrestle with are looking at what Christ consciousness might be like for the individual who's on the journey there. That'll be my first point. And the second point is, what would it look like to have the planet itself move toward Christ consciousness as a global community? So that's what I will wrestle with in the homily. And then presumably in the community meeting afterwards, we'll wrestle with the notion of how do you aspire to Christ consciousness as a community, as a small group like ourselves. So that's what I attempt to do this morning. So my first point then is, what does it look like to attempt movement towards Christ consciousness as an individual person? And I want to preface that with a kind of a metaphor. When I was in high school, I was a high jumper. And the way you were trained to be a high jumper was, you look at the bar that you're attempting to jump over, and then you look at the ground in between, and you measure your steps. You know exactly where each step is going to go. And typically you'll take maybe 6 or 7 steps max to a high jump. But once you begin your run, you can't look at the ground anymore. If you look at the ground anymore on the way to the bar, you're going to hit the bar. So you've decided where each foot is going to go, you've planned your run, but then once you start your run, you keep your eye on the bar. And that's the only way you'll get over it. You will not get over the bar if you take your eye off it and focus on the steps in between. Now, a few weeks ago, I talked about a vision board, something I do for myself for my birthday every year, where I create under 8 different categories what my vision for myself is for the year ahead. And then I revise it every birthday. And I sent that out. I was asked by the community if I would send that out on COG All, which I did. Now, I want to emphasize that this is not a description of who I am. This is affirmations and aspirations to whom I want to become in my dedication to Christ consciousness. So it's not saying, here's where I am. It's saying, there's the bar I'm attempting to jump over. And now as I begin my run, I'm not focusing on the ground anymore. I'm not focusing on Sean, I'm focusing on Christ consciousness. Because if I focus on Sean, I'm going to knock the bar. And so everything I offered was by way of aspiration and affirmation about the bar that I'm attempting to go over. And so I want to revisit that vision board now, because it was my personal template, and it may be of benefit to other people who are trying to create their personal templates of what would it look like for you to attempt a movement towards Christ consciousness. How would you aim at that? And so I preface my template by saying, I am plugged into the universe so deeply that I am a channel for love and light and life for the planet and for our times. Now, this isn't a kind of a megalomaniacal, narcissistic, inflated notion of self. This is the truth for every single one of us. The truth is that when you decided to incarnate, you did not devote anywhere near even 50% of your soul force to incarnation. There's an aspect of you which has never left the presence of God. In Hindu cosmology, they will call that part of you, they will call it Atman. And the part of you that you devoted to incarnation, they will call Jiva. And so your entire soul force, only a part of that is dedicated to incarnation. The vast bulk of who you really are, your core essence, is eternally in the presence of God. So when I say I am plugged into the universe so deeply that I am a channel for love and light and life, I mean precisely that Atman is constantly in God's presence, God's space. And since Atman and Jiva are always connected, then there literally is a plugging in that happens all the time. But mostly we're not aware of it, mostly we forget about it, or mostly we're told it doesn't exist. So this is not some kind of fantastic claim, this is your birthright. You are plugged into the universe so deeply that you are a channel for love and light and life for our planet and for our times. It's a question of becoming aware of that and opening up the communications both ways. So that was the kind of the preface with which I begin my vision every morning. So then there are 8 categories that I try to look at. If I were to try to attempt Christ consciousness, what would that look like, on the ground where the rubber meets the road? And it seems to me there are 8 places where the rubber meets the ground. So this is an 8-wheeler that we're driving here this morning. It's an 8-wheel drive. And the first piece is, what would my spiritual health look like if I were really aiming at Christ consciousness? How would that look like? And the phrase I've used is that I have transcended mere cultural faith and instead embrace faith in the ineffable source. Because I came to the conclusion years and years and years ago that there are many things we're called upon to believe. And most of these are artifacts either of our culture or they're artifacts of our religious upbringing, our spirituality. And so I have to ask myself the question, which I do constantly. If I hadn't been born into this particular culture, would I still believe that article? Or if I hadn't been born into this particular religious faith system, would I still subscribe to that dogma? And if the answer is no, if I had been born in a different culture, I would think this article of faith is ridiculous. Or if I hadn't been born into this religious belief system, I think this dogma was ridiculous. If that is the answer I come up with, I reject it. If I can say, no matter what culture I was born into, or what religious faith system I was born into, if somebody proposed this article to me and I found it made sense to me, then I'd hold on to that. Because then that is an article not just of individual cultural faith, it's faith in the ineffable source. So there's the kind of the yardstick or the criterion by which I judge what the politicians are telling me, or what my culture being Irish is telling me, or what my faith system being born as a Roman Catholic tell me. I put that yardstick and say, this article, can I believe, if I weren't born Catholic, would I really believe that the Pope is infallible? Absolutely not. I think it's ridiculous. And so I say, I don't believe it. If I were born Jewish and I'm told that I am part of the chosen people, I might accept it. If I weren't born Jewish and somebody told me the Jews are God's chosen people, that the ineffable source of all that is chose a particular universe, a particular galaxy, a particular solar system, a particular planet, a particular species, and a particular piece of real estate and said, that's my chosen land and those are my chosen people, would I accept it? Absolutely not. Do I accept it? I don't. And so I go through culturally and religiously, article by article, and figure out for myself what is really of God and what is merely a cultural artifact. So that's what I mean by some kind of spiritual health. I also say for myself, I constantly try to experience Turiya and Turiyatita. These are 2 kind of Buddhist words. Turiya in Buddhism is the notion of the observing self. Not the ego, but the soul who is separate from incarnation, who watches. It's almost like Atman and Jiva. So Turiya is the Buddhist equivalent of Atman, that part that observes the incarnational process. So try to constantly getting into that observer mode and not getting caught up in the vicissitude of incarnation and being thrown by it. And Turiyatita is a little bit beyond that. Turiyatita is the notion that you are both the observing consciousness and you are Atman and you are Jiva. You're having both experiences. You're having the observer experience from the soul's place and you're having the incarnational experience from the ego place. Can you walk with those 2 legs together? Can you experience and celebrate and honor incarnation without identifying with it? Incarnation is not who you are. It's an experience you're having. And so that's what I mean. That's what spiritual health would look like if I were aspiring to Christ consciousness. These are kinds of the yardsticks that I would use. The second category I look at is my intellectual health. And I say I am developing an encyclopedic understanding of the universe's and their myriad forms. Now again, this is not some kind of megalomaniacal self-inflation that I know everything. It's a recognition of the fact that we are part of a God who has videotaped everything every single one of our great-grandchildren has done. God is like a doting great-grandparent who's videotaped everything that's happened to all of our great-grandchildren. And so Hinduism will call this the Akashic Records. Modern quantum mechanics will call it the metaverse. That the universe in which we inhabit is just one child of a metaverse who spun off many, many, many universes which have a lifespan, they have a beginning, and they have an ending. But the learnings from all of these universes is stored in archives that I'm going to just call the Akashic Records. And when we know how to get there, every single one of us has access to all of that kind of information. And that's what it's like for me to aim at Christ consciousness at an intellectual level, to try to find out the ways in which I am plugged into that reality. Not so I can feel inflated or important or be a know-it-all, but that I'm accepting my birthright as a child of God, plugged into all of the experiences that all of my brothers and all of my sisters have ever had. So that's what it looks like to me to have intellectual health as I aim towards Christ consciousness or towards a Buddha nature. The third category I use, it's my dream health. I've been recording my dreams since about 1978. And I want to learn how to dream lucidly. In other words, I want to know when I'm dreaming that I'm dreaming. And I'm not just talking about the dreams at night when I close my eyes and I go into REM sleep. I'm talking about this dream right here now, because this is just another form of the dream. I keep saying to you that life is a dream that the ego is having, and that the ego is a dream that the soul is having, and that the soul is a dream that spirit is having, and that spirit is a dream that source is having. So I want to be able to lucidly live. In other words, I want to realize that this too is a dream. And when I say it's a dream, I don't mean it's not real. Dreams are real. They are just a different level of reality. But I want to realize that this is not ultimate reality. This waking consciousness is not ultimate reality. It's a level of the dream. I want to be able to realize when I'm living that I'm dreaming this particular level of reality as well. It is not ultimate reality. And I want to realize that in dreams at night that I'm visiting what Hinduism will call the astral realms, or the esoteric literature will call the astral realms. And there are two levels to these planes, according to the esoteric literature. There are the higher astral planes, which are the dimensions in which energies whom we would associate with ascended masters or beings of light, where they reside, angelic presences perhaps. And then there are the lower astral planes, where other night travelers like you and I who are dreaming, or perhaps even discombobulated souls who have left this planet, who have shed their spacesuits, but are still a little bit confused and lost. We're going to meet those kinds of travelers. And when I meet the first kind, the beings of light, I want to be educated by them, and I want to be healed by them. And when I meet the second kind of travelers, I want to be able to reach out in assistance to them. Any sentient being who's confused and whom I might meet in the astral planes, I want to be of benefit insofar as I'm able to do it. So that's my dream health. That's what that would look like to me. Then the fourth category I use is, what would it look like to be emotionally healthy as I strive towards Christ consciousness? And it would be to develop the ability to multi-perspective, to walk in others' moccasins, to be able to appreciate another viewpoint in any issue. I don't have to agree with the other viewpoint, but I need to be able to appreciate the other viewpoint. And it means the ability to accept feedback graciously and work with it, even if I don't sometimes agree with it. And it means to be able to look at my own shadow material and to be able to work my way through that and go beyond that place. And particularly it means to try to reside in a place of serenity, so that I live in a place where I'm not acting out of fear or anxiety or out of anger, that I'm living in a place of serenity. And so I have a saying for myself when I go back up home every Sunday evening.